100. That's the number that stopped MotoGP dead in its tracks on June 7, 2026. Marc Marquez crossed the finish line at Balaton Park Circuit in Hungary and became only the third rider in the entire history of Grand Prix motorcycle racing to reach 100 victories. Third rider, ever. After Giacomo Agostini and Valentino Rossi, Marquez now stands in that same company. And the way he got there is a story nobody could have scripted, even if they'd spent years trying. The man they call the Ant of Cervera didn't arrive at 100 wins by cruising. Every single one of those victories got ripped out of a track, a rival, or a situation that told him it wasn't possible. And on the day he reached the number, the sport handed him one final test just to make sure he'd actually earned it the hard way. Because Marc Marquez earning things the easy way has never once been part of the script. Born in Cervera, Spain on February 17, 1993, Marquez started chasing motorcycles before most kids his age were chasing footballs. His first taste of Grand Prix success came at Mugello on June 6, 2010, a 17-year-old in the 125cc class, threading a Derby RSA 125 through the Italian hills with a precision that made veteran mechanics do a double-take trackside. That win wasn't a fluke. He went on to secure 10 victories across that season, which closed with a 125cc World Championship. The junior class had been his training ground. He graduated with honors and moved on fast. 16 more wins came in Moto2. His first arrived at Le Mans on May 15, 2011, barely a season into the intermediate class. And the pace he showed from day one signaled that this was going to be a short stay. But ask any serious fan which Moto2 race defined him, and they'll give you the same answer without hesitating. Valencia, November 11, 2012. Start position, 33rd, dead last. A penalty dropped him to the very back of a 33-rider grid, and any other rider accepts that situation, manages the race, scores what points are available, and gets on the plane. Not Marquez. By the end of lap 1, he had already carved his way to 11th place, passing 22 riders in a single lap through traffic, barriers, and sheer nerve. 3 laps from the end, he took the lead and won the race outright. Starting last. Winning. Who does that? That single ride told you everything about the kind of competitor the sport had just developed, and the 2012 Moto2 World Championship confirmed it 6 days later. April 21, 2013, Circuit of the Americas, Austin, Texas. Marquez stood on a MotoGP grid for only the second time in his life and crossed the line first. His first Premier Class race win arrived before most riders even get comfortable fighting for a top 5, and the championship followed at the end of that same rookie season. At 20 years old, he became the youngest MotoGP world champion in history, a record that still stands going into 2026. If you want more deep dives into legendary racing stories and MotoGP history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. What followed across the next 6 years with Repsol Honda rewrote the sport's understanding of what was physically possible on a motorcycle. 6 Premier Class titles: 2013, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Lean angles that made engineers question whether the data channels were calibrated correctly. Saves from slides that defied every model of tire grip and body mechanics the sport had built up over decades. He won races in the rain, from the front, from behind, on tracks that suited his Honda and on tracks that absolutely didn't. 59 of his eventual 74 MotoGP wins arrived during this Honda period, against Jorge Lorenzo, Valentino Rossi, Dani Pedrosa, and an increasingly sophisticated field of challengers. The dominance ran deep enough that riders stopped asking who would win and started asking who would finish second. And then July 19, 2020 happened. Jerez. With 4 laps remaining in the Spanish Grand Prix, a high side sent Marquez tumbling into the gravel, where his own bike struck him and shattered his right humerus. The bone broke into pieces. Surgery followed immediately, but the first operation failed. Another surgery, then a plate broke, then an infection, then a bone graft. 4 operations on the same arm stretched across nearly 2 years, and layered on top of all of it, a vision condition called diplopia disrupted his ability to race for extended stretches. The man who had made the physically impossible look routine spent race weekends in street clothes, watching rivals from the garage. His Honda no longer matched the direction the championship had moved, and his body wasn't cooperating with the demands he'd always placed on it without a second thought. The 2021 and 2022 seasons were a slow, grinding attempt to rebuild something that the crashes and operations kept eroding. How do you come back from 4 surgeries on one arm, a vision condition, 2 lost seasons, and a manufacturer whose machinery no longer fits your riding style? How many riders absorb all of that and return to the front of the field rather than quietly fading toward retirement? Most don't even try. Marquez went to Ducati. In 2024, he signed with Gresini Racing, not a factory seat, a satellite team running year-old machinery. For a rider carrying 9 world titles, that move raised eyebrows in every corner of the paddock. The Ducati disagreed with every skeptic immediately. His win rate climbed back to levels that hadn't existed since the Honda years. By mid-season, he was fighting at the front with older spec equipment, which meant the factory Ducati Lenovo team had already started making phone calls. They signed him for 2025, and the 2025 campaign ran the way his best Honda seasons had, only with 6 additional years of race intelligence behind every decision. He took the MotoGP World Championship, his 7th Premier Class title, his 9th World Championship across all categories. A 9-time world champion at 32, after 4 arm surgeries and a vision condition that had come close to ending everything. Back on top of the sport. Again. Which brings everything forward to Balaton Park and the chaos that handed Marquez his place in history. Weeks before Hungary, a severe crash at Le Mans put him back in surgery, shoulder and foot this time. When he arrived at the Balaton Park paddock, it was only his 2nd race weekend back on the bike. The team managed expectations carefully. The press asked the fitness questions. Marquez talked about taking the weekend 1 session at a time, not promising anything specific. Saturday qualifying ran to a gap of 0.053 seconds. That's the margin between Marquez on pole position and Pedro Acosta in 2nd place. A gap so small, it's practically a tie, which meant Marquez was operating at the absolute ceiling of what the Ducati GP26 could produce while riding through post-surgical discomfort. He then won the Saturday sprint race in what he himself described publicly as super sport mode, meaning he had additional pace available and chose not to spend it. Calculated, controlled, pure class. Sunday, June 7th, 2026. Lights out from the Balaton Park grid. Turn 1, lap 1. Jorge Martin on his Aprilia locked his front brake going into the corner. No warning, no slowing down. The crash swept up Marco Bezzecchi, the championship leader, alongside Raul Fernandez, Fermin Aldeguer, and Fabio Di Gianantonio. 5 riders. Gone. Just like that. Championship points evaporated in 2 seconds of sliding carbon fiber, and out of the front of it all, Marquez ran completely clean. Acosta refused to make it simple. The young KTM star overtook Marquez on lap 2 and pushed the gap past a full second. From the broadcast, it looked like a generational shift unfolding in real time. A younger rider outrunning a recovering champion on a 2nd weekend return from surgery. But Marquez doesn't read races the way broadcasts do. He tracked the deficit, managed his tire wear, closed in lap by lap, made physical contact with Acosta, going wheel to wheel on multiple occasions, and on lap 15, he executed the decisive overtake that stayed stuck. Francesco Bagnaia finished third, distant. Acosta took second. Marquez took history. 100 wins across 3 classes, 10 in the 125cc, 16 in Moto2, 74 in MotoGP. And then the detail that sent the Ducati garage into scenes nobody had rehearsed. Marquez's 100th Grand Prix win was simultaneously the 100th MotoGP victory for the factory Ducati team. A double century. 2 milestones, 1 finish line, 1 man. What do you even say about that? The Triple Digit Club has exactly 3 members in the entire recorded history of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Agostini at 122, Rossi at 115, and now Marquez at 100. But the context around his 100 deserves to be stated plainly, without sentiment getting in the way. 74 Premier Class wins came on a modern 4-manufacturer grid, where Aprilia, KTM, Yamaha, and Ducati all field competitive machinery across factory and satellite programs, where no single team maintains the kind of technical monopoly that earlier eras allowed. Agostini's record was built in a different competitive structure. Rossi's longevity across multiple decades is its own separate argument. What Marquez produced in the modern era of MotoGP is a specific, standalone achievement, and nobody serious about the sport can dismiss it. Is there another rider in this sport's entire history who has lived the full arc of what Marquez has lived? The teenage prodigy, the unprecedented dominant run, the career-threatening injury at the exact peak of his powers, the surgery upon surgery, the public verdict that the chapter was closed, the rebuilding on customer machinery, the move to a new manufacturer, and then the return to the championship. The answer isn't complicated. Nobody has done all of that. Nobody has come back from 4 operations on 1 arm and a vision condition and won the world title, and then claimed their 100th career victory at 33 years old on a circuit they'd never raced before, 2 weekends after getting off a surgical table. The 2026 season keeps running. Bezzecchi will recover and return to the points fight. Acosta has no ceiling. More races sit ahead. More battles between a generation that grew up watching Marquez on television and the man who refuses to acknowledge that he should be stepping aside for them. At 33, with 9 world titles and 100 wins spread across 16 years and 3 classes, he remains the benchmark the entire paddock measures itself against. 16 years, 3 classes, 4 surgeries, 9 world titles, 100 victories. The Ant of Cervera has written the most complete career this sport has ever produced, and the pen is still moving.